Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday. I am Julie Ann Mejia, and this is episode 11 of The Holistic Alternative. Today, we have a truly amazing guest joining us. This gentleman led the pathway for the cannabis industry and helped patients gain safe access to the plant well before it was legal to do so. He has written a phenomenal book, One Step Over the Line, Confessions of a Marijuana Mercenary, sharing his electrifying story of being a smuggler and then assisting the DEA. He is a dedicated husband, father, and also hosts his own podcast and advocates for those imprisoned for non-violent cannabis offenses. Today, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Ken Baer to the show. Ken, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it because we only have 40 minutes today and you have such a phenomenal story. I really want people to hear as much as possible about your journey. So how did you get started and involved with cannabis?
Well, it's back in 1969, my father passed away when I was at 13. And, he said, whatever you do, let me know if you ever get involved in drugs. And, of course, right after he died, the next thing I did was smoke some marijuana. And I was 13. It was 1970, free love, hippies, Woodstock. It was the times. And then from there, at about 16, my mother moved us to South Florida, which would have been 1973, to get away from the drugs and the crime of New Orleans, which really was none. But South Florida was, the epicenter of when the marijuana explosion truly happened. So I was basically moved right into from the fire to, as they say, from the pot to the fire, so to speak. And that's how I started smoking. The thing about New Orleans was the marijuana was, it wasn't the main thing. People did other drugs. It was, like I said, 1970s, early 70s. They were doing mescaline and acid and experimenting with those drugs. When I moved to Florida, people truly were getting now from New Orleans was getting Tex-Mex, Mexican weed, which really wasn't that good, to the Colombian weed, which was excellent. So it was a real metamorphosis for me because the marijuana was just so much better and plentiful, because the closest destination from the ports in Colombia, it's 1,500 miles to the coast of Florida. So that's the closest area from, other than Jamaica, which is about 600-700 miles. So both those great buds back then. That's how I got started. And
Absolutely. That's amazing. And, it's comical, right? How far we've come with the quality of cannabis. I used to smoke Mexican brickweed and it sucked,
Yeah, it just sucked.
It was awful. It was crappy.
That's where Cheech and Chong had the song, "No Stems and Seeds You Don't Need."
Yeah, I love it.
And seeds. But the marijuana from Colombia, especially a couple of years later than the early, like in the mid 70s, was incredible. Spongy red and orange buds and, just really good stuff compared to the Mexican, especially.
Absolutely. So you started using, experimentally. How did you get into, working in the industry essentially like illegally? Let's talk about that.
Happened? Yeah, so, we moved to our new high school in Hollywood, Florida. And remember, 1973, Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, even Miami, was a sleepy little beach town, especially Hollywood. And we got into this new high school, and I had went from a little school in New Orleans of 270 kids to a school of 2,700. So, and I had long hair, and so I was a naturally, and I had hair down the middle of my back. Now I have no hair. I take my hat off and just be a glow. So we just got into selling it because we were a little, I had no father. We had money. It wasn't that we were poor. It wasn't we were middle class. It was that it was there. Imagine landing in San Francisco in 1849, or
Right.
Palo Alto of the same era, 1973, 75. All this was exploding around us, and everybody was selling drugs. And, we wanted free pot, we had jobs. My brother was a dishwasher at I did odd jobs. I was a houseboy at a hotel, but, we needed our marijuana money. And so we started selling it. Obviously, we were the cooler kids in town. So, because we were the ones selling it. But everybody was doing it. It was everywhere. And I just grew into the industry, basically. Imagine if you grew up in a steel town, you work in a steel mill. If you grew up in the coal mines, we were townies. We were just local kids, and it just landed on us, and we just ran with it, for lack of a better word.
I get it. I mean, prohibition unfortunately put everything on the back burner, right? We had to go to our local suppliers
Yes,
because
yes.
that's the only way we could consume.
Exactly. If you wanted a joint, what people don't understand today is you had to buy or sell a joint from one friend to another friend, or from one associate to another one. You're already committing a drug deal. You might as well sell it and make a bunch of it and make a profit. And back then, what people don't understand today is that you could go to jail for a year for one joint. Even up to, listen, I always like to tell this statistic. About last year, 220,000 people went to jail for marijuana, or got arrested for marijuana. I apologize. 92% for simple possession. So about 220,000 people had to get a charge of cannabis. It's insane. So the war on drugs, as my book One Step Over the Line, Confessions of a Marijuana Mercenary, is my story. And I started writing it. Believe it or not, I started conceptualizing it in my 20s, going, wow, what have I done? Not knowing that it would go into my late 30s doing it, 22 years roughly. But it's really a story about that, about these little inner city, middle income, non-inner city kids in a sleepy little beach town in the 70s getting sucked into the war on drugs. As I say in my book, how did the government not know that prohibition just 50 years earlier, we were not going to have more of the same, They knew, somebody had to know, as I say, that making something that everybody in the country wants illegal was going to cause, build a black market business, black market. And I always say nobody was happier than the judges, the lawyers, and the politicians.
It's true. And unfortunately, it's a crime against humanity. We have been
Right.
connected with these plants for thousands of years, that we have a system that processes them.
Yeah.
And it's concerning, it's don't even get me started about prohibition. It's such a crime.
Yep.
So,
I have friends that have done 27 years in jail. I have friends that have done 22 years, 27. I mean, there's, to this day, as I alluded to you, that I'll bring it up. Freedom Grow, which is a charity I'm heavily involved in, is a charity that helps nonviolent cannabis prisoners to, helps their families, buys the kids school supplies, gives them commissary. I donate every month. I'm on my credit card just gets hit every month to donate to Freedom Grow, along with my personal efforts of trying to help do golf tournaments, whatever else we need to do to raise money. But there's people to this day still in jail today for 30 years in life for simple possession of or intent to sell, whatever, marijuana, which the business was built by the government, not by us.
Right. And guess who's getting taxed on it, right? They're collecting taxes, and they're still keeping people in prison for it. It's totally unethical.
It's insane.
They should not be collecting a cent until everyone is released. It's
or
really
they should release everybody if you're going to make a legal business about it. And listen, a lot of states, have went back and said we need to, change, take off the convictions, but they're not letting, you know why they're not letting anybody out of jail? Because prison's a
Make too much
great
money.
business. Right.
Yeah.
It's a business.
It's always about the money,
But I have to
unfortunately.
tell you, for me, my current wife, my love of my life, is anti-drugs. And when she met me, she said, listen, you can smoke all the marijuana you want. You need it. I said, thank you, because I know I do.
Cannabis is a medicine for a lot of people,
For me,
including
it is.
myself,
Yeah.
so I believe that. So let's talk a little bit further. How did you get from a small time, mom and pop kind of guy to, getting arrested and,
Twice.
dealing with some bigger stuff? Let's talk further about your,
Yeah. So I was a kid. I was, 16, 17. And what are you doing? I mean, I'm trying to climb the corporate ladder,
yeah,
right? If I'm
for sure.
selling 3-fingered ounces and lids and then pounds and then, um, I tell you what, two big things that changed my life. One, I was a friend of mine, but one of my best friends at the time, or my best friend, had introduced me to a fellow that his father was working with buying and selling boats. And this guy, Sandy Perkoff, was his name. And I'm 18, he's probably 40. And he took a liking to me because I was a hardworking, smart kid. And he kind of introduced me, he was selling boats to smugglers. So I tell the story in the book. I'm 18 or 19 years old, and I'm literally in a Learjet by myself with almost $2 million flying more than once, multiple times, taking Learjet trips to the Cayman Islands with millions of dollars for the smuggling operations. I also had a partner in Florida. My brother and I were selling pot and stuff, and so was another friend of mine. We were selling pot and stuff. He moved to Cleveland. Well, one day he calls me up and he's working at the Ford factory. And he says, and I was selling weed all over town. He goes, hey, I think I can sell a couple pounds of weed here in Cleveland at the Ford factory. He goes, can you give me a couple pounds? I said, sure, come down and get them. So he jumps in his car, drives the 1,900 miles to Hollywood. I give him 2 pounds. He drives home. He sells them. He calls me back. He goes, hey, I sold those. At that exact time, a big smuggler that I was running the money for and doing odds and ends for, Donnie Steinberg, who, if you Google him, is one of the biggest smugglers in the world in history. I got a bail of 50 pounds from him. My friend drove back down. We shoved the bail in the back of the trunk. The bail of pot is usually between 45 and 55 pounds. It would look like a burlap wrapped big suitcase, like a really big suitcase, or a hail. If you've ever, I grew up on a farm in New Jersey at one point. It's like the size of a bale of hay. So it doesn't fit in the trunk too big, in that car. Drove it home and sold it. And that started our 12-year ongoing business of running. It got to the point where we run thousands of pounds up there, just thousands had 3 and 4 cars that would hold 300 to 400 pounds in each trunk. Around 300, 400 was tough, 275, 340. And we would just run them back and forth. And then I started working with other smugglers. Then I ended up, around that same time, I took a break to leave the country because I was implicated in a drug case. I was about 19. I went to Jamaica on the run, stayed down there about 6 or 7 months. And then some friends of mine came down to visit. And the one guy was a private pilot. And we all we all decided to put up some money. Had a mutual friend in Jamaica that they all knew, that I knew. And we smuggled my first load out. It's about 600 pounds of Jamaican lamb's breath, man. As a Jamaican once said to me, that's the best. Jamaican weed is like Mexican weed, but the lamb's breath is, as he said, it's like what did he say? It's like the breath of a baby lamb. So we smuggled
One of my
that
favorite
out.
strains.
Yeah,
Lamb's
I love
Breath
it.
Sour Diesel, the double sativa. That'll keep you going,
So anyhow, we ran that up to Ohio, and I just kept working. And then, I stayed at it for, I've been in, it was fun. It was exciting, and it was profitable. I mean, I'd get a phone call, come on, because they knew I could sell it. When the smugglers came in, they would call me, and I'd go into a building with 40,000 pounds of marijuana, and take out my trusty pocket knife I still have today, cut open all the bales, look for the ones that I felt were good for me, put my mark on, and then send the crews back to pick them up. That was a night's work. And then the cars would, it It's,
No, it was a necessity, right? People really needed it, and people still use the underground market. There's
oh,
still
absolutely.
states that don't have safe access.
Well, I mean, even down here, there's medical marijuana, but it's pricey, and you have to get a medical marijuana card. Let me give you an
Right.
example. I have a card. I can find marijuana without going to the dispensaries, but
For
I do
sure.
it to support the process and to make myself legal.
Correct.
It's $170 twice a year for the. It comes out to be between the doctor's visit, which has come down now to it's about. It's weird because the card lasts 7 months, but the doctor's visit only lasts. I don't know. You have to do it twice a year, so it
Right.
comes out to being $500 or $600 a year just to have a card.
That's
It's
terrible.
crazy. Imagine
Yeah,
if
it's
they.
not
I
right.
mean, I understand, but it's just not right. I mean, people should be able to go into any store, any place, if they feel like it's good for them, and get it. You know this, and nobody. There's so many medical studies, and so many people I know that are better off for having it in their possession, in their system. Me being one. And
Absolutely.
there was a study out of Denmark I saw last night. I wish I would have shared it with you. They checked 5,000 men, only men, because they use it for they use their comparison from when they joined the military in their 20s and their cognizant test they took in their 20s, and then they checked them in their 60s, and they found that they had compared 5,000, non and did a blind study kind of thing, or however they did it, and no cognizant loss, whether you
I
started
believe it.
smoking as a teenager or if you're in your 60s as an adult. As you get older, they found a 1.3% loss in their cognitive abilities. I just go, I'll be happy with that. I'll take that.
Exactly, exactly. It's a neuro regenerator.
Yeah.
People don't understand that people, that have neuro disease, to take cannabis, it actually helps them. It helps them get better. So I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it with Parkinson's. I've seen it with a number of different neuro diseases. And unfortunately, coming from a cognitive neuroscience background, we were taught it was the devil's lettuce. It was
Right.
it was totally bad for you, and it was a
Devil's
it was a
weed.
gateway. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's really crazy to hear that.
And I'm going
But
to tell you about the gateway thing. My
yeah,
kids, I was obviously been involved in the drug business now 50 plus years because I'm still working with people in Oregon. I've been involved in different parts of it: CBD, CBG,
yep.
CBA, CBN. And by the way, a great way to get a good night's sleep is CBN for sure.
Oh
And
yeah, it's
no
great.
non-habit forming, no Xanax, no Ambien, just a nice dose of CBN and you'll sleep like a baby. And
Absolutely.
and so it's still it's a burgeoning industry. Sorry, if they would allow it to be more legalized, the amount of help people would get, but also the economic uh, advantages for people in the business and the economy as a whole is just crazy. It's a $1 billion industry that's being crushed down to a black
Absolutely.
market.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And you having children as well, and being in the business,
Well,
it's really about education, right?
that's what I was going to say. The funny thing is, both my kids knew my story, when they got old enough. Neither one of them really read the book. I don't. Either did my wife, who even helped me write like certain sentences.
Yeah.
Because going back in that whole thing, my daughter says, "Daddy, nobody wants to know about their parents like that." And I said, "But neither one of them are drug users."
That's
Matter of fact,
great.
all four of my kids, my two bonus boys, none of them use marijuana, and it's because if you take the stick, you take the excitement out of it. It doesn't become it's not a drug that, and it's not a gateway. It's not a drug until you named it that. In other words,
Right.
when I was a kid before marijuana, you may not be old enough to remember Boone's Farm. It was like the cheapest wine. And, that was as a kid at like 13, you'd get a bottle of Boone's Farm and sneak behind. I remember we snuck behind a house and drank it. It was horrible. And, or
Oh,
MD 2020, rotten
yep.
alcohol. And then once I
Gross.
started smoking weed, I didn't drink that stuff anymore. I don't drink
Absolutely.
today. I mean, I did drink, but today I just smoke my weed and I relax. I go to a restaurant, they ask everybody what they want to drink, and I'll say a glass of water.
Yep. Same over here. I haven't had a drink since 2018. And for me, it was no good. It was poison for me. I'm a
Yeah.
diabetic. I couldn't process it. So for
Yes.
me,
Yeah.
cannabis,
Nothing
please,
but
only.
sugar.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So, no, that's
So,
amazing. So, how did you, after you got caught the first time, you started back up, right? And then
yeah, because I
you
have
ran
no
into
common
some
sense.
you were trying to help people, right? And get the product out there and
Well,
the business.
so I was trying to help at that point. Well, here's the thing: what people don't understand, you build a business. Remember, I had in 1988, I got busted the first time. I had people working for me, so
Yep.
I had one of my drivers buy a house with the money he made from
Yep.
and then that house he sold to my other driver when he decided to move out of it. So these
Yep.
are kids in their 20s buying houses, living good. I mean, we paid them $1,000 a run plus expenses. So you might say, well, that's not worth it. Well, in 1980, that's like close to $4,000,
Right.
$3,000. Do that twice a week in your 20s. You're
I agree.
do that 5 times a month. You're making basically in today's dollars, 10 to 15,000 a month, working a couple hours at a time. So it was good for them, obviously. I got busted the first time. One of my friends, Bob Silverbullet, and that's the same guy that was the pilot that
Okay.
flew the weed out of Jamaica. He got a seaplane now. The last time he used the Cherokee 6, he had bought a seaplane, and one of our other friends, Bruce Goodwin, I'll say, had smuggled 40,000 pounds into Canada and had it stashed in a fish warehouse. And it wasn't selling. And the reason it wasn't selling, it turned out, is terrible. But he
Smell like
made a deal
fish.
with me. It needed to swim with the fishes. The
Right.
fish was better than the marijuana, I think. So anyhow, we were smuggling the weed back into America to try to sell it. We used a seaplane. He would land in a lake in Canada, load up 200 or 300 pounds because that's all the seaplane could land, and landed in a lake in Maine. Now, most of the smuggling we do at night, all of it, but a seaplane can't land at night. It has to land in the day because it can't see the water. I mean, you could do it, but we couldn't do it. You'd have to have a team of people to do it. Very difficult to land in because you can't read the waves. So we smuggled in about 1,400 pounds, and I was moving it to another location in a U-Haul, and I got pulled over and they found it. I won't go. The story is way in depth. It has to do with 4th of July and fireworks, but that's all in the book. So I got busted, and I kept working to pay for the lawyers. I actually went to a lawyer. I got in trouble 2 or 3 times. I asked the lawyer, I don't know what to do. You know what he said to me? It appears what you're doing is pretty profitable and you're good at it. You just don't get caught. And I was thinking as a young man, I'm going, that's not good advice.
That's
But
terrible advice.
yeah, and so I kept working, going back and forth. I was actually going back and forth to court, and I got tried in Salem, Massachusetts, in the actual courthouse that they do the witch tours in. While I was on the stand testifying, my lawyer said, by the way, around noon, you might see a little tour go by. Don't pay attention to them. And I'm testifying, and there's a tourist walking through. But it was determined that the police officer pulled over the truck illegally, searched it illegally. And so the evidence, the 1,400 pounds, which, by the way, when it went to court, was only 1,220. So somebody had taken a couple of bales out of the mix. It was missing. The amount exactly was like 2 bales. They threw the case out. So now it's 1988, and I'm in wow, I got away with it. I wasn't doing as much. The business had slowed down. I'd done other, we were still doing it, but I went back in 1992. I was still working. I got married. After my honeymoon, I said to my then wife, I have to go back to work and pay for the wedding, the honeymoon, the diamond ring, And I went back to Texas. This time we were getting weed out of Texas because they were getting better. The Mexicans were growing solid, kind of California outdoor quality, and picked it up in Texas. Only 100 pounds, not thousands like I used to do, but 100,000. It was I paid $80,000 for it. In the old days, 100 pounds would have cost me $24,000. 1,000 pounds was $245,000 back in the 70s and 80s. But remember, back in the 70s and 80s, $245,000 would have been like $750,000 today.
Huge.
I'm 20 something years old doing $250,000 deals like they're candy, not thinking, gee, that's a lot of money. So anyway, the second time, my partner in Ohio had gotten busted, and he turned me in, and me and another friend that he had turned in, we all got charged, and I got charged with racketeering, running a 12-year ongoing criminal enterprise. And I'm going to tell you, my best friend back then, my partner, 32 years later, because of doing these podcasts, he found me on the internet, reached out to me. I talk to him all the time, and just yesterday, he's in North Carolina now. He goes, "Well, I'll pay for your plane ticket. You're going to come up here. I'm going to buy you dinner. We're going to take you." I said, "Well, you cost me $180,000 back then. I think you owe me at least a free dinner." But we have no animosity towards each other, because what people don't understand is that when you snitch, when you rat, what you think is, it's just part of the business by then. In 88, we kept our mouths shut. There was me and my driver in the case. We got out. By 92, Sammy the Bull Gravana, however you pronounce his name, had already rotted out the mob and John Gotti. This government knew by putting this 25-year, these huge cases. My partner, and I'll defend him, he had a house, and in the house, he had his wife and 4 kids. They had a barn on the property, and his father and mother were on the same property, like a farm, 3 houses. The cops came in on a Sunday morning, SWAT team. They found the pot in the barn. They handcuffed and arrested his mother and father. They arrested him in his underwear on the couch, 4 kids and a wife running around screaming. And they said, "You got 30 seconds. You either cooperate, or we're going to put your mother, your father, your wife, and you in jail. Your 4 kids are going to be orphans, and we're going to take your parents' home and your home and everything, and we're going to confiscate the whole thing." So what is that guy going to do? He has to turn on me. I would be, first off, it just doesn't work the way people think it does. Like, oh, you're on the streets, and the creed is, and I understand the stigma. Even when you're in first grade and you're on the playground, what do you tell your friend? Right. Don't snitch me out to the teacher. Don't be a tattletale.
So how'd you get involved with the DEA? Let's talk about that a little bit.
So I went home from Ohio. I got bond after 3 months, kept my mouth shut, wasn't going to talk. And my 2 lawyers are like, "Look, you got to do something. They have you dead to right. They have a stack of cassette tapes. They've got the weed. They got the keys to the truck. They got, everything that I always knew not to do. It always, if you follow, it always is that one time you get busted, all the things you did wrong." And they had me dead to rights because they had 17 people testifying against me that I didn't know that at the time. But I came back from there, and I was broke because I just lost $100,000 in weed. My truck, I sold my other truck before the marriage, before the honey, went away. I spent 60, 70 grand on getting married, a diamond ring, a honeymoon, lawyers. I had to buy a $400 station wagon, canary yellow station wagon with no air conditioning. I was broke. And I'll tell the listeners, when you're the king, when you're the head of the party, everybody loves you. But as soon as the shit hits the fan, you walk alone, and usually somebody's shoe hits you on the back of the head on the way out. People don't have a whole lot of. So anyway, I get a call from a friend of mine who was a yacht broker that had gotten in trouble. He introduced to me by what I call bad dad, Sandy Perkoff, the original yacht broker I worked for. And he basically said, he called me. I was in my house. I'll never forget this. My town, my baby's at the high chair, because I just had a 1-year-old baby. And as I got my daughter was 1.5 when we got married. So I'd been married 3 or 4 weeks when I got busted. And I had basically a 1.5-year-old daughter looking for her daddy, who's in jail. And he said, "Hey, how would you like to work for the DEA?" And I looked around, like, "Are you crazy?" I didn't want my wife to hear that.
Right.
He said, "Come talk to me, have lunch with me." And he basically told me he was working for the DEA. He had gotten caught in a reverse sting scam. He was going to sell a boat to that the DEA pretend to be a smuggler. And the law is, if you're selling yachts, boats, cars, planes, a banker, a lawyer, if you knowingly, willingly do business with a criminal and you take money from it, then you're as guilty as they are. It's called conspiracy. So here's a guy who never sold drugs in his life, had a big life with 2 houses, multi-million-dollar business. All that went down the tubes. And I said, well, why would you? What's the point? He goes, it kind of came out to be if that the DEA is kind of like a multi-level marketing service. If our deal, if I work for, if he brings me in, then he'll get credit for what I do. And between me, that guy was Dave Jackson. He killed himself when they said that no matter all the work he did for the DEA, they were still going to put him in jail. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He killed himself. I had to pull, basically, I was right there when he killed himself. I wasn't there when he did it, but I was there the next day cleaning up the mess. And another guy that in my book I call Sabo was one of the biggest smugglers in the world. Between the 3 of us, we were kind of like a DEA dream team. Now, I never turned in any of my friends. Not one of my friends that I grew up with that went to high school with me, they actually asked me to do it one day. It's called a proffer. Well, you'll tell everything you know about every deal you've ever done, and the government can take it and use it against anybody but you, unless you leave something out or misrepresent. And then everything you've told them can be used against you in a court of law. And I just told my DEA handler, I said, I'm not doing that. I said, I come from a little town. I have a wife and a kid. I'm going to be in jail. I'm not going to turn in my high school friends and all my kids I grew up with. I can't. Everybody sold drugs. I'd have to turn in, I'm not doing it. But they used me as a kind of an undercover operative because I knew everything. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I knew when the weed that came in the Marlboro boxes and the Parliament boxes were red and gold buds from Santa Marta. And I knew if the kilos of Coke had a Condor stamp on it, that it was from Carlos Leader. So I did set people up. I did, because strangely, people came out of the woodwork. Friends of mine said, hey, I know you got busted. Here's the name of somebody. Even when I was in jail in Ohio, like a guy would come up to me and go, listen, I'm never getting out of what I got. This guy owes me money and he's a dirtbag. Turn him in. And here's his name and number. So through different things, I ended up doing 14 cases for the DEA. The biggest one was one they originated, but they used me as a kind of like a backup guy, and had me on the set, so to speak. And that was, if I'm correct, it's 10,000 kilos of cocaine going from Fort Lauderdale or from Florida to the Canadian mob. And that was the biggest bust I was involved in. It's in the book. I mean, the DEA flew in 3 carloads of coke in a C-111 cargo plane. They had a Learjet fly in. I mean,
Wow.
yeah,
You know what, though? I think most people won't fault you for that. Cocaine has ruined a lot of lives. Cannabis hasn't, so.
Yeah. Oh, no. And I sold a lot
Yeah.
of cocaine because I went along with the business.
Yeah.
But cocaine it's bad. My wife said to me, I'll tell you the whole statement. She goes, you can smoke all the marijuana you want. If you ever do a line of cocaine, I'm leaving you. And I said, if I ever do a line of cocaine, I'm probably leaving with also, like on a stretcher, and that's the other thing. It's because the reason the cocaine business became so prevalent was because they crushed the marijuana business. So when they put all that energy into so when they made it harder to smuggle, you can fit 30 kilos of cocaine in the same space as one bale of marijuana, kind of, and it's an example. So, but
So this has
remember,
been a wild journey for you. It's been a wild journey for you. And
I raced cars. I drove around in cigarette boats. I flew in Learjets. It was exciting, somebody once asked me, do you have any regrets? And I tell my kids, regrets is the biggest wasted emotion, right? Greed, jealousy, those are wasted emotions, but you can never go back. So if I don't have regrets, but I just wish, my dad died when I was young. I didn't have some good direction in that respect. I wish I would have been more proactive instead of reactive, because I was just reacting to everything that happened. I didn't have a plan. Listen, other people from the same town, my brother, other people became doctors, dentists, lawyers, but a big portion of us got into drug dealing. And even people you wouldn't know. I have a friend of mine that I've known for 20 years that is a service writer, and my mother used to bring her card to him, and it's like she loved. I mean, that's how we became friends. My mother introduced me to him. I found out about 2 years ago, his family was from Colombia. His father was fighting fighting the Colombian rebels to save his farm, and they were smuggling coke into America to fund the war against the rebels. Wow. And he went to jail for 7 years. There's so many people. I just ran into a guy that I've known for years, and he told me a story that back in the day, he used to be a cocaine guy and lived, $1 million. I go, you? Every time you hear one of those, you look at the person and go, you too?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But that's how I got involved. And I didn't think I was going to get probation, but after 2 years of working for the DEA, they actually gave me 100% probation. And I went home. Wow. But I'll tell you, in the end, it took years later, but my ex-wife left me. She didn't get hooked on coke. She didn't get taken down by cannabis. She wasn't a marijuana user. She got hooked on Oxycontins. She became a drug addict. She left me when my kids were 8 and 12 and left and never saw my kids again. So here's legal, big pharma. Basically, she died at 60 a couple months ago. We hadn't seen her in 20 years. We flew out to Houston to basically see her on her deathbed. She was brain dead, and she had a stroke, and there was meth and barbiturates in her system.
Yeah, so a lot of times people don't realize, right, that just because it's prescribed by a doctor doesn't make it safe.
Less safe. All those drugs, I mean, listen, I have 2 open heart surgeries, a pacemaker. I've got enough pill bottles I got to keep track of. But
it's a care sick model, man, So unfortunately, when they make plants illegal, that's the real crime against humanity,
Of course. I mean, it's a simple plant. Nobody's ever, as I always say, smoked too much marijuana and they got mad at their wife and got in a fist fight or got, what exactly. You're trying to say, because the chocolate chip cookies weren't warm enough and the milk wasn't cold enough.
Right. It's insane. It's insane.
Non-violent,
No, and at the end of the day, again, no one should be sitting behind bars for a plant that, they didn't have any violence with or anything like that. And thank you. I just want to thank you for, the hard work and the advocacy that you do. We're getting to the bottom of the 40 minutes here, and I'd love to pull up here some of your stuff. Yeah, this is your site. And how can people get in contact with you? And if they want to read your book, it's on my Amazon list. I'm going to be picking that up and reading that over the summer when I get some time off.
Yeah.
How can people purchase your book and get in touch with you if they want to have you on their show or if you want to?
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to start. We are starting my podcast. You can see there's a couple of me on other people's podcasts, but there's me in the race car. There's some of me and my drug running buddies. There's me and my brothers. You can go to onestepovertheline.com, my website, and then you can contact me through the website. You can get the book on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. And just so you know, I failed first grade. I'm profoundly dyslexic. I never really graduated high school. I did maybe a year of college, but I wrote the book, edited the book, and also read the book on the audio. The audio book is all done by me. The editing on the paperbacks, it's not the greatest. I mean, we found some things, but the audio I did it, and I had a lot of trouble doing it because I had, trouble reading, and I'm okay reading, but it was a labor of love. It took 7 years to write the book.
Wow, Ken, you're a big inspiration to a lot of people, and just to show, it goes to show people can change. They can start over at any point. So thank you, Ken. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and again, I like to just say freedomgrow.org. It's a great charity. Go on there and see some people that are really lives are being tossed because of the cannabis wars. And contact me. You can either have me on your show or come on my show. Everybody has a story. Everybody's taken one step over the line. Some good stories.
Absolutely.
contact me. I'm happy to help.
Ken, thank you so much for being a guest today and for sharing your story with the world. And we'll definitely be in touch. We so appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a great opportunity. Thank you
Thanks
so much. And you keep doing the good work you're doing, making medicine for all of us people in the world. That's phenomenal stuff you do.
Thank you so much, Ken. It really means a lot from you. Have a beautiful day. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. And thank you to Jacqueline and USA Global TV and Radio for everything that they do for our beautiful community. Have a beautiful rest of the day and tune in next month for another beautiful podcast.
Have you ever felt unheard? Like your words float into a void, leaving you invisible and disconnected? How about feeling judged when assumptions overshadow your truth, leaving you misunderstood and defensive? And then there's that moment when someone offers solutions you never asked for, dismissing your feelings and leaving you more frustrated than before. It doesn't have to be this way. Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the listening mentor, understands. She's here to help you reclaim your voice, build stronger connections, and create meaningful conversations that inspire understanding and mutual respect. Through her groundbreaking books, online and in-person courses, and interactive workshops, you'll learn how to navigate life's most challenging interactions. Discover the power of elevated listening and transform how you communicate. Master setting boundaries and asking permission to protect your peace. Learn to recognize and release judgment, fostering empathy and true connection. Dr. Kerbeck also offers personalized coaching, one-on-one or group sessions designed to fit your unique needs. Whether in person or virtually on StreamYard, her guidance will empower you to thrive. You don't have to struggle alone. The path to deeper connections and better relationships start here. Visit drjacqueline.com or usaglobaltv.com. Join a global community of empowered listeners and transform your life, one meaningful conversation at a time. Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck is the listening mentor. Start your journey today. Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honored to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/usaglobaltv. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Music by Johnny Dyes. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.